For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Professional Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
7:05. Welcome to today's Entrepreneur, presented by FL Fuller Landau, a program about the entrepreneurial spirit that drives Quebec business. My name is Dan Delmar, along with FL Fuller Landau's Josh Miller. Good evening, Josh.
Hello, Dan.
And this week we'll chat with Sebastian Cardarelli and Philippe Hynes of Tonus Capital. They are on the way this evening on today's Entrepreneur. But first, as usual, taking a look at some of the entrepreneurial news of the week, and lots to talk about. Why don't we start with Super Bowl, because it's coming up next weekend, and of course everyone's very excited about the ads. What do you make about some companies, and even some smaller companies, really putting everything into that one 30-second ad? You know, can that work sometimes for business? Can you just put all your eggs in one marketing basket and then just go for it?
Probably the most famous story, a Super Bowl ad, is Masterlock, where they put in their entire budget, at least for 1 year, if not longer, into this one 30-second ad. It wasn't even an ad that repeated. It was one 30-second ad of the Super Bowl. I think it was $2 million back in the day, so we're 20 some odd years ago, if not longer. And for them, it absolutely launched them. It was absolutely huge. Not only the ad itself, because it was seen by so many people, but just all the hype built up saying, hey, this one company was able to, to score this ad. Here, and the cost of Super Bowl ads is absolutely astronomical, as most people know. So there's this one company, this coffee company, that said, you know what, we're going to enter a contest, because there was a contest to get a Super Bowl ad in there. This little tiny coffee house, this coffee company, it's not in Montreal, it's out of the States, they registered or entered this contest, beat out 15,000 other small businesses, and they're going to get their chance at fame. They're going to have their 30-second spot. It's a coffee house. It's a black badge. There's skull and bones on it. They're trying to be unique. It's a small place.
The Death Wish Coffee Company.
Death Wish Coffee Company. But I'll tell you, really the moral of the story is, and we've heard it time and time again. We've heard it, one of the more prominent stories was Pure Vodka, Dan, when he told us how he got on the map and he entered a contest because it didn't take any real dollars. It didn't take a huge amount of effort. It basically took some time, energy, and paperwork. But in the end, it paid off big time, as it did for Pure Vodka, as it did for this Death Wish coffee. Because I know, I read it. I'm going to look for the article or the ad on TV, and I'm sure it's going to play because all the ads are online all the time.
You mentioned Pure Vodka, and we spoke to Nicolas of Pure Vodka a couple of years ago in this program, and since then he's just exploded, blown up. I mean, and the contest you're referring to, he entered a vodka contest and ended up beating some of the best vodka brands in the world, including my favorite, Belvedere, and then everything went from there. So sometimes I guess you have to familiarize yourself with your industry and enter those contests once in a while. You never know.
You really, and it's not just entering the contest, because then it's also entering, filling out applications for grants, filling out applications for anywhere where it could give a boost to your business. There's so many things that can be done that doesn't take a lot of money, but you have to be resourceful. You have to check online is the internet and the information. It's a bit overload of information out there, but there's definitely things that can be done. And like you said, he won World's Best Vodka. This Death Wish Coffee is going to have this 30-second spot on the Super Bowl, an absolute coup, just like Masterlock, although they paid for it, but it's absolutely huge when you can get your dollars and your name out there in such a big named event.
Speaking of vodka, it's great that we talk about vodka more than twice on the program.
Except we're not drinking, Dan. We're just talking about it. That is possibly the unfortunate aspect, but hey, that's what we do.
That is unfortunate, but there's a new vodka brand coming out that's for health conscious people.
And I think this is also a company, and it's a bit of a theme what we're looking for. It's be eventful, be resourceful, and look forward. And the reality is, vodka is, everybody thinks, oh, it's great, it's vodka. It's really not that fattening, that caloric, that sugar. But the reality is there is sugar in vodka. And for those that are really looking to cut back, and it's enough that some people add cranberry. We won't talk about the Red Bull that some people put with it because that is bad. But there's this vodka company that came out and said, you know what? There's so many health conscious people out there. As we spoke last week about Freshie and them capitalizing on the health phase. They are finding to distill and make vodka with no sugar components or very little sugar components. So it's out there. All you got to do is be resourceful, be inventive, know what the times are, think a little bit. Don't just go with the flow and think a little bit, see what's happening around you, and then apply it. There's so many ideas out there. It's got to happen.
Especially with this health craze. I mean, we talked about Freshie last week, but it seems like everyone, even McDonald's, is going to have to start ditching some of their junk food.
And I mean, they already have for many years. They've had this salad, and I remember the McDLT, where it was like it was a lot of salad and energy, a lot of salad and vegetables on one half, a little bit of burger on the other. But they were advertising the freshness of the lettuce and the tomato. They're going that way. Listen, like the McCafe, they're trying to have some healthy treats and all that. Absolutely, but they're not the only ones. I mean, Burger King for a long time has had these $1 items that's chili, so it's a little better, and some of these they have no choice but to go that way, because if you want to appeal to the masses, or you want to get everybody in your door, and you want people to know why they come in your door, you got to say, hey, if I want 10 people to come in, I got to try and appeal to these 10 people.
Mm-hmm. Shoes.com, big in America, and they're coming to Canada.
They saw a gap in the marketplace. There's so many things that you can buy online. There's no question about it. But there are certain, I think what they capitalized on, and this is what it's in the article, is the logistics side of it. It's not always so readily evident on how you ship things cross borders. And I'm not just talking Canada, US, I'm talking all around the world. But once you have it down to a science, you can absolutely capitalize, because there's so many people out there, small retailers, small online sellers, that have not mastered the logistics side of the business. And we try and talk about the logistics side in a number of entrepreneurs on the show, Dan. We don't really get into too much of the detail, but it is a science. And there are so many things that can go wrong, so many things that can screw up, so many things that can cost a lot of money. But once you have it down to a science, especially when you're an online company and you're selling 1s and 2s and 3s and not shipping cases, it's absolutely tremendous. So they were looking at the Canadian marketplace. They were looking at the online Canadian marketplace and said, you know what, there's really not a lot of competition, because people haven't fully figured out how to transport these items into Canada or out, which kind of sounds ridiculous because it's there. But they're capitalizing on it because they know that the market is not nearly saturated in that regard.
Apps now, speaking of technology, and later on the exchange we're going to talk about Uber and its effect on the taxi industry here in Montreal, but there's also another revolution brewing in snow removal. There's a couple apps right now that you just sort of bring up the app and call someone to remove your snow, and they come really quickly. So this is a bit of a trend. If
you don't have a child that's active enough that you can you don't have to bribe to shovel your driveway, and my son, my daughter, they help out a lot at times, is really there. You can make an app. Everybody has the expression, there's an app for that. Well, the reality is, if you think hard enough and you don't sit on your laurels, and you kind of figure out what services can be done out there, you can find an app. You can create a product or service that will fit that need. All you got to do is sit down and think about it. Really, some things sound like rocket science, and some things sounds, oh my gosh, it's a light bulb idea. But there's so many opportunities out there. And when you're talking about that, and you're exploring new opportunities or even new markets, don't limit yourself to Canada. Don't limit yourself to Quebec. As we see, Shoes.com is coming into Canada. Well, there's plenty of things that we can go outside of Canada. Mm-hmm. And Can Export, just quickly, to throw this out there for those that don't know, Can Export has come out with a program only really a few weeks ago, where it's only for entrepreneurs, for small businesses. Your sales are between 200,000 and 50 million. That's the criteria. And you can get 50% subsidized or grant money for any markets that you reach out to that you haven't reached out to in the last 24 months. So if you're a Canadian company selling shoes, and you want to, hey, I want to go out into Italy because I've never been there before. Well, your market study and your travel and your, and whatever is related to out there, you can apply, and you have to spend at least $20,000, but you can get back a minimum of $10,000 and up to $100,000 per project, not per project, but per location or target that you're going to go to. So Canada is coming back into the game of let's help SMEs try and reach out and try and export.
I'll have to save the story for next week. It's really interesting. The 8 industries that are best for starting a business in 2016, and some of them are very different and innovative. So we'll get to that next week. And coming up next on the program, Sebastian Cardarelli and Philippe Hynes of Tonus Capital. They are profiled tonight on Today's Entrepreneur.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Professional Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
7:19 on CJAD, inspiring stories from outstanding business people. Dan Delmar and FL Fuller Landau's Josh Miller with you. And this evening, we're talking with Sebastian Cardarelli and Philippe Hynes of Tonus Capital. Sebastian, Philippe, welcome to CJAD.
Thank you. Thank you.
So first question, really easy. Tell us about yourselves and tell us about Tonus Capital.
So Tonus is an investment management company. We manage a North American equity portfolio. With a concentrated approach, 15 to 20 stocks in our portfolio. We're long-term investors, value style driven, and we have a track record of 8 plus years now. So we manage money for a combination of high net worth individuals, family offices, pensions, and some private clients.
Now, so this is a business that is not so easy. I mean, you have to roll with the flow. You have to roll with the punches. You have to be, get in the right investment. You have to communicate with your customers. How did you and why did you get into this industry? Like, when did this start for you?
Well, investments has always been something that I enjoyed. I've always liked money and to make money.
Well, we like money too. We don't necessarily do what you do, but we all like money.
And investments is a good way to make some big money if it works out nicely. And it all started for me back when I was a teenager, or even younger than that, when my father bought me a couple of shares, and I started following them in the papers. And then from that point on, I liked investing. I liked to watch the markets, read about the markets. And in university, I joined a program that was on where someone had given $1 million to real money to invest. And that really kicked it off. I got connected in the industry in Montreal, and during my undergrad, really knew that this was what I wanted to do.
So, was Tonus your baby? Did you start that, or did you join that later on?
So the idea behind doing Tonus was to create something a little different, and it was actually started by a former business partner, Steve Boutin, who started the firm. And the beginning wasn't easy. Money that was supposed to be coming in from a large investor never got in. The person passed away, and it took longer than he thought to get for that money to be distributed. And a year and a half later, when the money came in and Steve was looking for a partner, I jumped in. I wanted to create something. I wanted to start a business and do everything. And
were you already working in the firm at the time, or were you elsewhere?
So after graduating, I worked for Standard Life in Van Berkem. So there I was a partner. Was a great firm, and was a difficult decision to leave something great to join something that was nascent and just starting. But the challenge was big, and I wanted to do it, and I wanted to create something of my own with my former partner. So we wanted to create something different with our own values, our own culture, and that's what we tried to do.
And Dan, we constantly hear this about entrepreneurs. It's about taking risks, about jumping in. It's there is the unknown out there. There's no question about it, and it's pretty scary. And there's family also that's around you that have to support you. So it's very much a characteristic of most entrepreneurs out there. And when we come back from the break, we'll hear a little bit more about how Philippe took over the partnership and kind of what his huge salary was in the first few years of working at Tonus.
Sebastian Cardarelli and Philippe Hynes of Tonus Capital this evening with us on Today's Entrepreneur.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Professional Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
From Tonus Capital, we have Sebastian Cardarelli and Philippe Hynes with us. Tell me, guys, how this partnership came about.
So I had been working after my partner and I bought him back. I was alone, and Sebastian came to meet me from a referral a family member of his had in Toronto. And
Well, it was December 2012. I'd been working for a large Canadian banking institution. Prior to that, I'd worked for a large international banking organization. And when I met Philippe, we were in the same building on McGill College, and this young gentleman came in. I asked him what he did. He showed me. I said, "Who else works here?" He said, "It's just me." And then I asked him if he thought you could maybe manage investments and client relationships at the same time well. To which, of course, he said, "No, I think that these roles are generally suited to different personalities and certainly different careers." To which I said, "Well, great. Why don't you keep doing this wonderful investing work you're doing?" At that point, Philippe had returned about 20% for 2012 and then went on to return 40% in 2013, which was spectacular. And I said, "Well, as you might realize, I like to talk." I'm sure there are a few listeners who know that out there already. And
we haven't cut you off yet. Oops, that's one.
And I thought, this seems like the right kind of opportunity. As the son of an entrepreneur as well, I haven't taken the full plunge to run my own business, but I do like the idea of being number two and sort of hitching my wagon to a shooting star, where the shooting star has maybe shouldered most of the risk, and I have a lesser share of it. But by the same token, we'll both partake of the spoils and not necessarily be working too hard for anyone else.
And risk is certainly a big aspect to it. And I think, Philippe, when you first got into this, and there's risk, there's monetary risk, and I'm sure there's family risk too. Was that part of any decision making, that your family had to be involved, or said, "You know what, I got to jump in. I'm going to have both feet in there. I have no idea where it's going. Do I have your support?" Does that come into play?
Absolutely. I had long discussions with my wife before taking that big decision to move from somewhere where I was comfortable, was making good money, and to go where a new business where we knew we would not pay ourselves at the beginning. And I remember telling my wife that it would take 1 year before we would be profitable and I could pay myself.
And how long did it take?
Thinking 3, so it's probably 4. And she was very supportive and was working at the time, so could support us during these years.
Now, you mentioned the founder before. Was it an easy transition? Was it an easy buyout? Was it very smooth? Did it have any hiccups where you have good experiences with the attorneys? Maybe you can kind of recount a little bit of that transition or buyout.
So in 2011, we got to a point where we needed to make a decision, if we were going to push hard, or what we could do to start making some money. And at that point, Steve had a great offer from one of Canada's most renowned firm in Toronto, and he decided to take the offer and move there to manage one of their portfolios. And it was we kept talking. He didn't hide this from me. It was very transparent in the process. So we were in good terms then. We were still in good terms. We established a value for the company that was very fair. I mean, at that point, when you have an unprofitable firm, it's hard to get a high valuation. So
But you agreed on a number.
We agreed on a number. We had a good contract written by the lawyers. So we knew what to expect, and given it wasn't overnight that he arrived and said he was leaving.
Was client transition easy? Like, was he handling clients and then you started taking them over, or like how smooth or not smooth was that?
Good question, because we were co-managing the portfolio from 2009 to 2011. But Steve had been the one there from the beginning, and there was a risk that clients, when they heard the news that he was gonna leave, that they could be leaving. So we went out to meet all the clients, and it was a bit the make or break time for the business. And we told the clients what was going on and what was happening, and if they were going to support me if I continued by myself, and about 75% of them did so.
and no clients, no money, no business. So when we come back from the break, we'll talk a little bit more about staying in communication with them and how you kind of are out there finding others.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Professional Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
7:35. Welcome back to Today's Entrepreneur, presented by FL Fuller Landau, a program about the entrepreneurial spirit that drives Quebec business. My name is Dan Delmar, along with FL Fuller Landau's Josh Miller, and our guest this evening is Sebastian Cardarelli and Philippe Hynes of Tonus Capital. And Josh, another example of I guess, switching things up, bringing a new partner and taking things to the next level.
Well, and it's really about how do we take it to the next level. And in this game, as most people know, in any business, but certainly here, if you don't have your customers, you don't have your money that's invested, you can't make any bucks. So, and you're a relatively small, and you're an independent house, so you don't have the big name behind you, but you have big ideas, big heart, and of course, big return, as you mentioned earlier, at least in a couple of years ago, a few years ago. What is your success? How do you go get clients? What works for you? What worked for you, Sebastian, when you first started? How did you make it work? How did you attract people?
Well, as with, starting out any new venture and even sort of a fledgling, almost startup type operation, you have to be patient. There aren't really too many shortcuts anywhere. Sometimes you might have some great luck, but you tend to work to make your own luck. You have to be out, you have to be doing. A lot of sales, really. I'm not so interested in the marketing side, but more sales is always going to be about you have to be going out, you have to be meeting people, you have to be consistent.
Where were you meeting them? Where were you finding them?
Happily, having spent some time with larger firms, I already had contacts. Having been in sales for a long time, I'm a natural networking type person, so I have plenty of friends. The great thing about joining Tonus Capital was previously with the large international bank, the large Canadian bank, I wasn't very comfortable inviting friends and family to invest with me or with my firm. Happily, when I met Philippe Hynes, and one of the most important things was all of his wealth is specifically invested in the program. Well, now I could open up to family and friends. I was 100% confident this was the right way for everyone I know and love to invest their own hard-earned wealth. So that was a great starting place. And then, of course, when you're making great returns, as we've done, and people are satisfied and happy, referrals and word of mouth, there can be a natural momentum that builds right there. The other thing that can obviously happen is through success and having good returns. But again, there aren't really any shortcuts. It might have been the case many decades ago, say in Switzerland, they could sit there and they could watch, they could just let the phone ring. But we have to go out and actively, present ourselves and let people know. By the same token, we are not out to cajole or try and persuade anyone to do something. We are great believers in caveat emptor. We would like to have people take sort of the first step and say, this seems very interesting. I like the fact that Philippe has all his wealth invested here. The fees seem very competitive. I like the simple structure in nature. You're focused on one thing that even I can understand. We really believe simplicity is key. And so we want people to take the first step and just ask for more information rather than me calling you up all the time to say, do you have any money? Are you interested? Do you want to open an account?
Do you're as I mentioned before, you're small, you're an independent house. How do you get around because there have been some horror stories about these smaller investment companies that have rooked people and taken their money. Do you have to fight that stigma? Do you have to fight that notion that, hey, I'm not one of the big boys out there, I'm a little guy, but don't worry, you can trust me, everything is safe? Do you ever have to field that question?
Yeah, we do get that question often, more so 5 years ago when the scandals were out, but still today people remember. And regulations the barriers to entry are high in the business. The regulators have very strict rules that need to be followed. So starting a firm is very difficult, very long, and very expensive. And when the firm is running, there's still a lot of oversight from the regulators. So there's few firms that are starting for that reason. And there's an extra cost for us to be able to show the clients that we do have a third party doing the valuation of our fund. We do have an external auditor that are auditing the books. So that's expensive, but it's important.
With all the regulations, and I mean, I certainly don't know all of them, but there's no doubt they're huge and they're vast and they're really, really strict. The regulations, the compliance. How does Tonus Capital, a small firm, manage the structure and the cost of keeping up with all these regulations that constantly change and are constantly imposed on you?
Yeah, so we have to be up to
And I know it's not just another year of not taking a salary. This got to be a little bit more.
Well, the lawyers are involved, and we have to always be on the forefront of what's changing. I must say that both the AMF here in Quebec and the OSC in Ontario are very good with communications, with emails now, and they tell all the information, they tell the changes, but this year there's many changes happening in the industry, and every firm, the large and the small, need to comply with the new rules, and we do have to spend some time and to write the policies, have a manual book, and be compliant with everything that they're asking for.
Technology, I'm sure, has played some role over the 8 years that Tonus has been around, and certainly for however long you've been in this business. What's been the biggest change? What's been the biggest kind of barrier? I mean, I hear often enough, some people call and say, hey, have you heard of this stock, or where do you want to invest? And I say, maybe I'm not sure about that one. And then they rattle off everything, because online you can get anything. You can get all information. So has technology helped your business, or kind of made it a little more difficult as you have to field even more knowledgeable questions from clients?
Yeah, well, the clients they are more knowledgeable. There's more information. It's always a challenge for us to filter what's important and what is not. Our style of investing, we're long-term. We have 15, 20 stocks in our portfolio. We turn a third per year. So our job is to find 5 or 6 good investment per year. With technology, it helps to get more ideas, but at the end of the day, our work is to do a lot of deep dive research into our names and read the financial reports and go talk to clients, suppliers, and technology won't help you to read faster the annual report. This is something that this is how we differentiate, but there is definitely more software out there. The big firms have access to these electronic computers that do all the trading, and we're not trying to compete on this game. We're trying to compete on our long-term focus, and for that, there's nothing better than reading the 100 pages of the annual report.
And if I could just add as well, when I met Philippe and I said, well, I could probably get you access to some research, and he said, no, I'm not really interested in that. Following in the investing schools sort of originated by Benjamin Graham as espoused by Warren Buffett. I'm not going to suggest that Philippe is necessarily Warren Buffett 2.0 North, but it is exactly the same principles and philosophies. So Philippe wants to come in every day and look at the worst performing stocks from yesterday. Which are the 10 that were down by 20, 30, 40% or more? Let's start with those. Those are the ones that nobody is really interested in. It's not really so important as to when you buy a stock, because they're always sellers. It's really more important about when do you sell your stocks, especially given that a lot of times there aren't any buyers out there. So in looking to double our money in a 3 to 5 year horizon, I mean, Philippe, in looking at one company, Primerica, he joined their insurance training program just to see if they were legitimate or if it was kind of a multi-level marketing play.
Do you do everything yourself? Do you have other employees or other team members that are part of your group?
So we also have two employees working with us, doing research and everything else.
But that didn't start from the get-go. You were pretty much doing a lot of it on your own at the beginning.
It's all Philippe, all by himself.
At what point did you realize you needed to add those extra bodies?
Yeah, well, when in 2011, when we made the decision to continue, I cut down the costs and went down to being by myself. And when assets grew, it allowed me to have a bit more revenues. I've always had the need to have more people around me, and with more assets, we had revenues. We could hire. We started with Sebastian, and then we hired 2 more people to help us on. Basically we do research, and then there's all the other administrative things to do.
So for you, it was revenue first, people after, and you pretty much covered it all in between.
Yeah, exactly.
Excellent. I think there's always so much more. There's never enough time to talk about everybody's business. But one of the areas we touched upon, regulation and compliance. And when we come back from the break, Dan, Ernie Furt's going to join us, and we're going to talk about regulation compliance challenges, but for items that relate outside of Canada. So foreign reporting, because as we all know, investments aren't always in Canada. There's many other great opportunities outside, but you got to know what the pitfalls are when you're investing in those.
Tax partner Ernie Furt from FL will be along to go through that very complicated process and all the complicated rules there on today's Entrepreneur.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Professional Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
Inspiring stories from outstanding business people. Dan Delmar and FL Fuller Landau's Josh Miller with you. Sebastian Cardarelli, Philippe Hynes of Tonus Capital is with us. We'll have their one piece of advice for today's Entrepreneur on the way. But first, tax partner Ernie Furt is with us again. Welcome back, Ernie.
Thank you. Welcome.
And Josh, we have some complicated issues in terms of compliance to get to.
Well, we really didn't get too much into the business, what actually Tonus does, but they are investors. We know that they are taking people's money, high net worth or otherwise, and buying stocks and bonds and ETFs and whatever they like in there. But there's no question Canada is not the only place where people invest. There's so many other areas out there in other parts of the world where individuals invest directly in companies or whatever other entities or products out there. However, there are issues, there are challenges, and there are things that people have to understand for reporting. Otherwise, bad things can happen. And payments can be made and penalties could happen. So we'll turn to Ernie and say, Ernie, with the myriad of investments out there that are outside of Canada, what are some of the items that entrepreneurs, that individuals should be aware of before they get into it? And I'm not saying the tax tail should wag the investment dog, but they're important areas that people should know.
People have to realize that when they invest in any type of foreign asset that produces income, that there's reporting that's required in Canada. So if they're Canadian citizens and Canadian taxpayers and Canadian residents, they're going to have to report their foreign investing in Canada. They're going to have to report their income for sure, as well as they may have to report on special forms, depending on the type of investment that they have. One of the popular forms is something called a T1135, which has been in the news over the past 2-3 years because they keep changing it. They're trying to build the better mousetrap. They haven't yet come to the best solution yet because it catches everything, but it is so complex in order to complete it properly that every year they go back to the drawing board and try and make it more user-friendly, and they're succeeding, but they're not quite there yet.
But there's no tax related to it. But if you don't file, then what happens?
There's no tax related to it, but there's a penalty for failure to file this form, which can be up to $2,500 per year, and if they deem it to be willful, they can double that penalty. So you can have situations, whether it's a corporate situation or whether it's a personal situation, where people haven't filed for 10 years. So all of a sudden you have massive penalties, and then you have to look at potentials for voluntary disclosures. And you have to be careful while doing a voluntary disclosure, because if there was a request for the information at one point in time, then the entire voluntary disclosure will go by the wayside, and they're gonna hit you with all those penalties for all the years in question. And you want to avoid that. So you want to make sure that when you do these voluntary disclosures, you do them on a no-names basis, you make your deal as best as you possibly can, and then you provide the information that they need, and then continue to comply with the rules and prep all the forms that are required. Most of these people, for a T1135, you have to have foreign assets in excess of $100,000. So that's foreign assets, foreign investment assets, at a cost of over $100,000. So it's not your garden variety Joe that has this. And this is not investments in an RRSP. These are investments outside of your RRSP and outside of your TFSA.
Now, this is for the regular investments, the stocks, bonds. What if you invest in an operating company, or you have a little bit more than the 0.1%? You have to report that as well?
An operating company you have to report, but there's a different form for that. Okay, depending on if you together with family members own greater than 10% of an operating company or any investment company outside of Canada, there's another form that you have to file, which is even more complicated. So you just have to watch your foreign stuff, talk to your accountants, tell them what you have, because if you don't tell your accountants what you have, we as accountants can't fix your problem or help you alleviate the problem.
And of course, when you're investing outside, certainly in the U.S., then there's this crazy U.S. estate tax that I'm sure a lot of people hear about. So when we come back after the break, we'll kind of fill people in on what they should consider before they own all those assets in the U.S.
Plus, we'll have Sebastian and Philippe's one piece of advice for today's entrepreneur next.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Professional Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
Sebastian Cardarelli and Philippe Hynes of Tonus Capital, their one piece of advice for today's entrepreneur on the way. But first, Josh, chatting with Ernie Furt, of course, of FL Fuller Landau, about compliance and about, setting up these kinds of investments abroad.
There's no such thing as actual U.S. estate tax here in Canada, but U.S. estate tax is absolutely out there and is probably feared or really misunderstood by a lot of people. Ernie, maybe you can kind of clarify the muddied waters a little bit and let us know, or let the entrepreneurs know, what they should kind of be aware of, first, second, things about U.S. estate tax and how they can maybe mitigate it.
First of all, most people think about U.S. estate tax. They think, well, if I'm a U.S. citizen, I have to pay U.S. estate tax, or I may be subject to it. But let's not deal with the garden variety issue. Let's deal with the Canadian who has U.S. assets. That Canadian may be subject to U.S. estate tax depending on how much U.S. assets he has. Because if his estate is significant, let's say over $5.5 million, and some of that is U.S., he is going to end up, or she will end up, paying U.S. estate tax on U.S. situs assets, meaning that you have a property, your secondary home in Florida or Arizona or whichever state you have it in. That'll count, and it counts at the value of the home. And it's not unlike Canada, where we tax based on an accrued gain. Here they tax on the basis of value. So today you don't have a U.S. asset, but tomorrow all of a sudden you buy a condo in the States for $1.5 million. Now you have $1.5 million of U.S. assets, and if you get hit by a truck the next day, you may have U.S. estate tax. So you have to be careful how you do that. Shares in U.S. companies count. Shares within your RSP in U.S. companies count. So you got to take a look at these things. Make sure that you limit your exposure on the U.S. side, do some calculations together with your accountant, and invest in certain mirrored funds, stuff like that, in order to help alleviate the exposure to the IRS and the U.S. estate tax.
Now, the $5.5 million, that's in U.S. dollars.
That's
right?
U.S. dollars.
So that's like 15 million Canadian today, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
So the threshold, I guess indirectly, or has gotten a little bit higher, but you still really, really need to be mindful of it.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure that Tonus, you mitigate. I'm sure you field all these questions, and it's really interesting to get into it. But we are at the point in our show, we're just coming up on the last moment, and as we do every week, we'll turn to you and ask you, what would be your one piece of advice for today's entrepreneur?
Hi, it's Sebastian Cardarelli again. Thank you for having us. We've had a wonderful time. In general, I would always suggest, try and be kind and work hard. Works for everybody, everywhere, all the time. But from a professional perspective, I would say, like the ISO group with the ISO 9000, 40,000 International Standards Organization, say what you do and then do what you say. It's easy to promise. Words are cheap. But you then have to back up what you say with actions. And I think that's very important, to be consistent in those two areas in all you do professionally.
Thanks very much, Sebastian. Philippe?
And on my end, I'd say that we most entrepreneurs start their business to make money, and I hope all of them will make good money. But I think most of us start a business for for some values, or there's something else that drives us to start a business. And my advice would be to write that down when the entrepreneur starts his business. Write 2 or 3 things, why he's doing it, and years later or in tough times, to go back to these reasons. And there's always more than just the profits and the success of the business. There's other things that can drive success for an entrepreneur.
Thank you very much, guys. Dan, my quick takeaway is a little bit on what Philippe is saying, and it's called perseverance. If you believe in it, if you know that it's the right thing to do, but things aren't always so smooth, but if you persevere through and you remind yourself why you do it, well, then that can absolutely get you through.
Thanks very much, Josh, and thanks to Sebastian Cardarelli and Philippe Hynes of Tonus Capital. Thanks to Ernie Furt, of course, of FL. And next week on the program, Eyewear.
Eyewear, Ronit Furt.
The exchange,
Ronit first.
The exchange is next on CJD. It's 8 o'clock.